This is my favorite tool. It is filthy. I'm going to go clean it. And by clean it, I mean knock it against the wood outside just to get the dirt off of it. There are lots of different tools that you can have. You probably don't need all of them, at least at first. Some of them are just specialized so that, you know, when you have a very specific job to do, you just use those, and others are more general taskmasters and can be used for multiple jobs. So people ask me, what is the first tool that you should buy? And I would say that the first and sometimes only tool that most people really need is a rogue hoe. It is the gold standard in trail building. It's 40 inches long. It's got a hickory handle. They're around 5 to 6 pounds. And I find that I can wield this sucker doing nothing but bench cut for about 4 hours. It is heavy, and I do find that if I'm wielding it like this, back end of the handle, it gets a little much swinging it around, so I usually choke up. It just allows me to make more cuts. The head of this actually does a lot of the work as opposed to me swinging it. So again, choking up just allows to go a little bit faster. It does a beautiful job of bench cutting. There's just something magical about this hoe that allows you to move massive amounts of dirt really fast. So it cuts through dirt easily. It cuts through roots really, really well as long as you keep it relatively sharp. It has 3 edges, so it's got an edge here and an edge here, and then this one, which does the bulk of the work when you're doing bench cutting. But I do find that if I'm going through tougher material or clay or even something with a lot of rock in it, that I'll go and I'll use this pointy edge as opposed to trying to drive the whole blunt thing through. With, you know, gravel and that sort of stuff, it just hits those rocks, it doesn't work. And then clay, there's just sometimes it is too much. Clay is heavy, it's a hard substance to work with, and so you can bite off smaller pieces by going on an angle, which is I find to be really helpful. I highly recommend this tool. It pulls dirt very well, almost as well as the McLeod, despite it being a little bit smaller. In terms of measurements, this one is 7 inches across, and the tool is about 8 inches in length there. You can get different sizes. Again, this one's 5 to 6 pounds. I wouldn't go any heavier than that. I'm relatively strong, and I find that anything more than 2 hours, if I had like a 7 or 8 pound tool, I personally wouldn't be able to swing it more than probably an hour. Now, there is another tool that I was using before this that I felt was quite a good tool. That's the McLeod. This is a McLeod. You can see for comparison the bench cutting side. So it has a blade that goes along here. That blade is 9.5 inches, so it's another 2.5 inches wider. And you might think that that is a good thing, but my experience is unless you're, you know, doing loam or something really dry and duffy, it's too much blade. You can't actually use this to great effect, whereas the Rogue, it seems like it's that perfect size for pulling and cutting through dirt. But the McLeod's a little bit different. It's bigger for actually pulling dirt. It's bigger, and so it's better for that. And you can move more dirt with a pull than you can with the Rogue hoe. And it also has this. This is like a hard rake. It's kind of like a mutant hard rake, and it's great for pulling loose dirt. But the McLeod, in my mind, it's a compromise of everything. It's not a great bench cutter, and it's not really a great rake. It can't shape, and the wonderful thing about a hard rake is it allows you to shape. It allows you to have a little finesse with it. This is very brutish, and it's hard to you know, have that finesse with it. So I don't love this, and I rarely choose this tool when I know that I have the Rogue hoe right beside me. The other thing, which is important, is that it's longer. So this is 48 inches versus 40. So you can swing it better and you can reach better, which is great. And again, for the raking part of it, it's great, but compared to a hard rake, you'll see that it actually doesn't come anywhere near it for reach. So the McLeod, like the Rogue, these are both generalist tools, but I feel that the Rogue hoe is much superior to the McLeod. It's not a bad tool. People have been trail building with it for probably decades. Now, so you can go bigger, which is what we did with the McLeod, but you can also go smaller. So when I owned a McLeod, I also owned a Pulaski. Now this is a Pulaski. It is, I think, like a forest fighting tool. I think that's where its origins are from. And the Pulaski has a sort of, it has a bit of a hoe end. And it also has an axe head. The axe head's pretty sweet. But the hoe part, not so sweet. So for when you were, digging, you had a much smaller surface for digging through material. Here, the Pulaski that I have is just over 3 inches. The tool, just in case you're wondering, is roughly 12.5 inches. Sorry, you can see that. 12.5 inches long. And the handle is a fair bit shorter. It's like your standard axe height, which would put you in the ballpark of 35 inches. So the Pulaski is great for clay. Okay, so what I was talking about with the Rogue hoe, sometimes when you get into clay, it's too much surface area to pull through wet clay. It's just a slog. And what's great about the Pulaski is it can really cut through that a lot easier. With the smaller hoe blade, you can power your way through that. It's also great going through stony dirt, so dirt that has a lot of gravel in it. It's better at breaking up the dirt than it is actually hoeing the dirt, which is an important distinction. So usually when I'm using the Pulaski, it's usually like the Pulaski McLeod combination, because here I'll break it up and then with the McLeod I'll rake it. It slows it down. It's like, this is why the Rogue hoe is so great, is because you can do those two things really quickly, whereas this takes a little bit of time. You got to go and get your tool, because your tool is of course never right where you want it. But it's really great for those sort of things. And the other great thing about it is this is the part that gets driven into the ground. So while it starts sharp, it gets dull with every swing, just like the Rogue hoe. But when it comes time to chopping through roots, etc., the Rogue hoe is dull because it's been going through the dirt. But the Pulaski has been keeping its edge sharp, not this one particularly, so that when you want to swing over and cut some roots, boom, there you go. It just does it so effortlessly because it's essentially an axe. The Pulaski is not really a great tool on its own. I would hesitate to head out into the woods with just this. I don't think you would walk away feeling like you were particularly productive with the Pulaski. Although it makes a great combo, again, with the McLeod. So the next step down from the Pulaski is your standard pick. So here's a pick, here's a Pulaski. You can see they're very similar. They have that hoeing aspect to them, roughly the same size, which means it's going to be similar in terms of effectiveness compared to the Pulaski, in terms of going through harder substances, clays, rocky soil, all that sort of stuff. I rarely use the pick, but it does have this great feature that really no other tool has, and that is of course the pick part of it, which is fantastic when you need to bust through rock or really, really rocky stuff. So I'll only bring this out when I know I have like a nasty section to get through. And then what I usually do is I'll use this in combination with a hard rake or a Rogue hoe to break it up, then to pull that stuff out of there. But the pick is more of a specialized tool than the Pulaski, which is a little bit more general, but not as general as the Rogue hoe or the McLeod. Just in terms of length, I mean, I don't think I need to do this. I'm sure you've all seen a pick before. It's the same as the Pulaski in terms of it's an axe height. It's really built for swinging, and yeah, it is another tool and another option. I wouldn't recommend going out and getting that first. Another digging tool, of course, is a spade or a shovel. I prefer the spade, which is the square edge. I rarely use this unless I'm moving a shit ton of dirt and I'm putting it onto tarps, or I'm able to chuck it. If I know that I'm going to be like 10 feet away, I know I can spade a bunch of dirt, but I typically don't like it because it's terrible at cutting through roots. So it's hard just to use the shovel without something else. Yes, you can stamp your way through it, but that is not a sustainable thing to do. But it is great if you need to move a lot of dirt. It's great for if you're moving dirt into buckets and that sort of stuff. But the problem with the shovel is that if there's a lot of roots in the soil, even ones that you don't need to cut necessarily with the Pulaski, when you're trying to move that dirt, the shovel gets caught in it and you're constantly getting caught on roots. Which I find to be an extremely frustrating experience. The pros are, of course, that this is cheaper, it's ubiquitous, you can kind of get them anywhere. And of course, if you're building jumps, it's fantastic for slapping, which makes great for compacting and shaping. So you may want this depending on what it is that you're building. Okay, let's talk about rakes. Before I started trail building, I used to think a rake was a rake was a rake. And then I started trail building and I realized not the case at all. You have two primary rakes. You've got your soft rake, like this one, and you got your hard rake, like this one. We'll talk about the soft rake first. The soft rake, obviously you probably know it from raking leaves, and that's really what it's great at. For clearing trail, whether you're first building or whether you're clearing in the spring or the fall, the soft rake is a fantastic tool. It's like $20, and it's an essential tool. There's really not that much to say about it. The rake I prefer more is the hard rake. I find it's a mediocre leaf remover, but it's an exceptional dirt mover. The one thing that drives me crazy about the hard rake is getting caught on roots. I'm not gonna lie, there's something about when I am moving a tool, whether it be a rake or a hoe or anything, and I get caught halfway through. It's something about the flow state. It's just like I kind of see red or maybe even white. I get quite angry. And so that does drive me crazy about the hard rake. It's one of my go-to tools. It's also really great at moving dirt. I didn't really understand why people were using hard rakes until I tried it myself. I was using a McLeod, which has like a profile like this, which is similar, but it's not the same. There's something about, again, it's the length. It's a long tool, so you can pull far, and then you can also you can sculpt with it, man. It's just got a really nice feel to it. It's a well-designed tool, and like the Rogue Hoe, it just feels purpose-built. So the Rogue Hoe is like the one tool that I will take if I'm only taking one tool. But if I can figure out a way to carry two tools, the next tool is always the hard rake.